If you're watching this, then my story isn't over. My name is Margaret, and for 68 years, I believed my legacy was my family. I was wrong. My legacy was my strength, and they tried to shatter it on my birthday. The scent of roasted chicken and fresh-baked apple pie, my son Daniel's favorite since he was a boy, filled my small, cozy home. I'd spent the whole day preparing, setting the table with my mother's china, the delicate floral pattern reminding me of happier times. It was my 68th birthday, and Daniel was coming with his wife, Chloe, and their 2 children. It was all I had asked for. When the doorbell rang, my heart fluttered with a familiar, hopeful joy. But the moment I opened the door, the joy curdled. Daniel's smile was tight, his eyes cold. Chloe brushed past me with a perfunctory happy birthday, her gaze already critically scanning the living room. The children, Lily and Noah, were shoved gently inside before they ran off, their small feet trampling on the handmade rug my own mother had given me. Dinner was a tense, silent affair. The compliments on the food felt hollow. Halfway through, little Lily knocked over a crystal vase, a gift from my late husband, Thomas. Water and shards of glass scattered across the floor. "Lily, for God's sake, watch where you're going," Daniel snapped, his voice a whip crack in the quiet room. "Daniel, it's all right," I said softly, already moving to clean it up. "It was an accident." That's when he turned on me. "This is why we can't have nice things here, Mom. This place is a museum of clutter. It's a hazard." He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor his father had laid. "Please, Daniel, not today," I whispered, my voice trembling. A cold dread was pooling in my stomach. I had seen this anger in him before, but never so directed at me. "Every day is the same with you," he yelled, his face contorted. "Living in this dusty old house, clinging to a past that's dead and gone. You're becoming a burden, Mom. A fragile, forgetful burden." The word forgetful hit me like a physical blow. It was a lie, a seed he'd been planting for months. I instinctively reached for my phone on the side table. A gut feeling told me I needed a record of this, proof of the man my son had become. Daniel's eyes locked onto the phone. "What are you doing?" "Recording me?" he snarled. Before I could answer, he lunged forward and snatched the phone from my hand. "You think you can use this against me? You senile old woman." He raised the phone high above his head and, with a roar of pure rage, slammed it onto the floor. The screen exploded into a spiderweb of cracks, then went black. The sound of the impact echoed in the sudden, deafening silence. The children started to cry. Chloe just sat there, a strange, satisfied look on her face. Then Daniel did the unthinkable. He picked up his own phone, dialed, and with a voice of calm, practiced concern, spoke to the 911 operator. "Yes, I need help. My elderly mother is having a violent episode. She's threatened us and destroyed property. We're afraid for the children." I stood there, paralyzed, as he spun his web of lies. Chloe then took the phone, her voice trembling with fake tears. "Yes, officer, it's true. She's been getting worse. We came for her birthday to check on her and she just snapped. She tried to hit the children." The betrayal was so absolute, so cold, it stole the air from my lungs. The police arrived, their faces a mask of professional neutrality as they took statements. They saw a distraught young family and a shaken, silent old woman. Daniel suggested a psychiatric evaluation, citing my increasing confusion and paranoia. Chloe signed the report, her signature a final nail in the coffin of our relationship. After they all left, the police, my son, my so-called family, I sat alone in the wreckage of my birthday. The food was cold, the gifts unopened, and the pieces of my shattered phone glittered on the floor like tears. But as I sat there in the deepening dark, a quiet, steely resolve began to burn through the numbness. They thought I was broken. They thought I was defeated. They had no idea about the box. The humiliation of the police visit was a stain that wouldn't wash out. My neighbors, the Wilsons, saw everything from their porch. The pity in their eyes the next day was almost worse than the anger in Daniel's. He showed up the following afternoon alone, carrying a bunch of wilted daisies. "Mom," he said, his voice dripping with a contrition I knew was false. I'm so sorry about yesterday. I was stressed. Work has been a nightmare. He stepped inside without an invitation, his eyes doing that familiar, appraising sweep of my belongings. I'll get you a new phone. A better one. You called the police on me, Daniel. Your wife signed a paper saying I'm violent. He sighed, as if I were a child complaining about a scraped knee. It was for your own good, Mom. You were agitated. We were worried. The police needed to understand the situation. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and I had to fight the urge to flinch. We're your family. We just want what's best for you. What was best for me, it turned out, was their constant suffocating presence. Over the next week, they descended upon my life like locusts. They needed me to watch the kids. Chloe had appointments. Daniel started working from home. From my home. They moved through my house as if it were their own. Chloe would open my fridge and toss out perfectly good food, claiming it was expired. She rearranged my kitchen cabinets, criticizing my illogical organization. Daniel went through my mail, opening envelopes without a second thought. Mom, this electricity bill is astronomical, he'd say, shaking his head. You must be leaving lights on all over the house. You can't be so careless. When I mentioned I was thinking of taking a pottery class, Chloe laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. A class? Margaret, be serious. At your age, you need to conserve your energy. You need stability. The most insidious part was the campaign they waged against my sanity. Daniel took Mr. Wilson aside, his face a mask of concern. We're so worried about her, he'd say, his voice low. She's been forgetting things. Just last week she left the stove on. I'm terrified she'll burn the house down with herself in it. It was a lie. A complete and utter lie. But the seed was planted. Soon, Mrs. Wilson was asking me if I needed help remembering my medications. I wasn't on any medications. The final insult came when they arrived one evening with suitcases. The landlord is doing renovations, Daniel announced breezily. We'll be staying here for a bit. Without asking, Chloe marched into my bedroom and began moving my things onto the guest bed. You don't mind, do you, Margaret? She asked, not waiting for an answer. We need the master. The closet is bigger. I was being exiled in my own home, relegated to the room my son had grown up in. That night, lying in his old bed, I heard them through the wall, talking and laughing in my room in my bed. I heard Daniel on the phone. Yeah, we're settled in at the old house. No, she's getting worse. Just a matter of time, really. When she's gone, this place will clear our debts nicely. I felt the last fragile thread of hope snap. They weren't just waiting for me to decline, they were waiting for me to die. They saw my death as a financial strategy. But as I lay there, the memory I had been suppressing for decades surfaced with crystal clarity. The box. Thomas's box. Before he lost his battle with cancer, my brilliant, quiet husband had made me promise. There for a rainy day, Maggie, he'd said, his voice weak but firm. For when you have no one else to turn to. I had never opened it. I never thought my rainy day would be brought on by my own son. The next morning, I waited for the sound of the front door closing. Daniel had a job interview. Chloe was taking the children to the park. I had a few precious hours of freedom. My heart hammered against my ribs as I went to the hall closet, pulling out a box of old winter coats. Buried beneath them was a small, heavy strongbox, its metal surface cool to the touch. Thomas had shown me the hiding place only once, a loose floorboard under the rug in his old study. With trembling hands I pried up the board. There it was, exactly where he'd said it would be, covered in a fine layer of dust. I carried it to the kitchen table, the weight of it feeling like the weight of my future. I didn't have a key. Thomas had told me I wouldn't need one. The key is your memory, Maggie, he'd whispered. Our anniversary. I pressed the small, almost invisible buttons on the side in the sequence of our wedding date. With a soft, satisfying click, the lid sprang open. Inside wasn't just a stack of cash as I'd half expected. It was a portfolio. Neat, organized folders held shares in blue-chip companies I'd only read about in the paper. There were property deeds for 2 commercial buildings downtown, and bank statements from an account I never knew existed, with a balance that made my head spin. But the most important document was on top. A new updated last will and testament, drafted just months before Thomas's death. I was the sole beneficiary. Daniel was mentioned only once. He would receive a modest trust, but only upon my death, and only if he had demonstrated unwavering loyalty, respect, and care for me in my later years. A sob caught in my throat. Thomas had known. He had seen the selfish streak in our son even then, and he had built a fortress around me. Beneath the will was a letter in his familiar, elegant script. My dearest Maggie, if you are reading this, then the rain has come. Forgive my secrecy, but I could not leave you vulnerable. I've watched Daniel, and I fear his heart has been poisoned by a hunger for easy things. This is your shield. Use it not for revenge but for your freedom. Remind him what family truly means. With all my love for always. Thomas I sat on the floor and wept, for the loss of my husband, for the loss of my son, and for the fierce roaring sense of power now coursing through my veins. They thought they were stripping a helpless old woman of her dignity. They had no idea they were trying to rob a queen. I didn't have a phone, but I had a landline. I called the one person I knew I could trust. Arthur Jenkins, Thomas's old lawyer and friend. Arthur, I said, my voice steady and clear for the first time in months. It's Margaret. The rainy day is here. Arthur arrived within the hour, his kind eyes widening as I showed him the contents of the box. Thomas was always 5 steps ahead of everyone, he murmured, a smile touching his lips. Margaret, this changes everything. We worked quickly. He had brought a new secure cell phone for me. While he began drafting the legal documents that would sever Daniel's financial expectations, a new will, a revocable trust, I made another call. To the most exclusive senior living community in the state, a place with villas and a golf course, not the grim facility Daniel had been researching. I'd like to schedule a tour, I said, my voice brimming with confidence. I'm considering a purchase. That afternoon, while Daniel and Chloe were out, I met Arthur at his office. I signed the new documents with a flourish. My house, my assets, everything would go into a trust that Daniel could never touch. A significant portion was earmarked for a charity supporting elderly victims of financial abuse. Are you ready for the next part? Arthur asked, his eyes twinkling. The reveal. More than ready. We drove to the luxury car dealership first. I walked in, dressed in my simple but elegant best, and pointed to a sleek silver sedan. I'll take that one, I said to the stunned salesman. Ma'am, that model starts at $65,000. I'm aware. I'll be paying in cash. The funds will be wired upon delivery. The look on his face was priceless. Arthur stood beside me, a silent pillar of support. Next, we went to the senior community. The Oaks. The real estate agent, a polished young woman named Brenda, was similarly taken aback when I chose the most expensive villa on the property, a standalone home with a garden and a library. Mrs. Pembroke, this is a significant investment, she stammered. I'm aware, I repeated calmly, handing her a bank guarantee letter Arthur had prepared. I'll be moving in next week. The final piece of my plan was the most daring. I knew Daniel and Chloe would be at my house that evening, no doubt going through my papers with renewed desperation. Arthur and I pulled into the driveway just as dusk was falling. I walked through my front door without knocking. Daniel was at the kitchen table, surrounded by my files. Chloe was in the living room, stuffing my silverware into a bag. Looking for something? I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. They both jumped. Daniel's face was a comical mix of shock and fury. Mom, where have you been? We've been worried sick. I've been shopping, I said pleasantly. I bought a car. And a new house. Chloe snorted. Don't be ridiculous, Margaret. You can't afford. I cut her off by dropping the car keys and the villa's preliminary contract on the table. Daniel picked up the contract, his face draining of all color as he read the numbers. "What is this?" he whispered. "Where did you get this money? It seems your father was a better provider than you gave him credit for," I said. "This money, this house, my future. None of it has your name on it. It never will." Daniel's composure shattered. "You lying old witch. You've been hiding this from us? From your own family." "Family?" I laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "You are not my family. You are my greatest regret." I turned to leave. "I'll be by tomorrow with movers for the things I want. The rest of this clutter, is yours to deal with." As I walked out, Arthur by my side, I heard the sound of Daniel's fist hitting the table, followed by a string of curses and Chloe's shrill, panicked cries. The fortress walls had just been raised, and they were locked outside for good. The story would continue for several more chapters, detailing the social media war, Daniel's downfall, his eventual genuine attempt at redemption, and Margaret's triumphant new life, ultimately circling back to the hook. The panic of Daniel and Chloe as they realize the inheritance they schemed for is forever out of reach. Continue writing up to Chapter 10. The silence in my new villa at the Oaks was a balm to my soul. No yelling, no criticism, just the gentle hum of a well-appointed life. But Arthur warned me the peace wouldn't last. "They know you have resources now, Margaret. Desperate people do desperate things." He was right. 3 days after my departure, the digital assault began. My new phone buzzed with a notification from Arthur. "Margaret, you need to see this." He sent me a link. It was a Facebook page, Justice for Daniel, filled with posts and a tearful video. In it, Daniel sat with Chloe, their hands clasped, their eyes red-rimmed. "I don't know what to do," Daniel began, his voice cracking with practiced emotion. "My mother, Margaret, has always been my rock. But after a recent substantial inheritance, she's changed. She's become paranoid, accusing us of terrible things. She's abandoned her family, her grandchildren who adore her. We just want our mom back." Chloe then spoke, her voice a trembling whisper. "She threw us out of her own home. We have nowhere to go. We're so worried about her mental state, living alone with all that money. It's made her a different person." The comments were a torrent of venom. "Money reveals true colors. How can a grandmother do this? She belongs in a home, but not that fancy one. Daniel, you're a saint for putting up with this." I felt a hot flush of shame and anger. They were painting me as the villain, a greedy, senile old woman corrupted by wealth. They were erasing their abuse, their manipulation, and rewriting history for a sympathetic online audience. "Arthur," I said, my voice tight, "what do we do?" "We fight fire with truth," he replied. "But we have to be strategic. Are you ready to tell your side of the story? Publicly?" I took a deep breath, looking around my peaceful, sunlit living room. A room I owned, a peace I had earned. "Yes, it's time." With Arthur's help, I created a simple social media profile. My first post was a single powerful sentence over a photo of the garden view from my villa. At 68, I learned that protecting your peace is the ultimate act of self-love. It was a shot across the bow. The comments were immediate and mixed, but it gained attention. Then we prepared for the main event. Arthur helped me set up a live video stream. I dressed carefully, not in the frumpy clothes I wore for them, but in a sharp modern blazer. I sat in my new library surrounded by my books, a picture of composure and clarity. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady. "My name is Margaret Pembroke. Many of you have seen the heartbreaking pleas from my son Daniel. Tonight, I want to show you what heartbreak really looks like." I didn't speak for long. I let the recordings do the talking. I played the audio of Daniel screaming at me on my birthday, the sound of my phone shattering. I played the clip of him coldly telling his friend it was just a matter of time before he inherited the house. I played Chloe's voice, crisp and clear, discussing the cheap nursing home and selling my property. The live viewer count skyrocketed. The comments section, once a mob against me, transformed. My God, the sheer cruelty. That's not stress, that's calculation. She's not senile, she's a survivor. Daniel and Chloe, you should be ashamed. When I finished, I looked directly into the camera. My son asked for my legacy. What he didn't understand is that my legacy isn't money or a house. It's my dignity. And that was never for sale. I ended the stream. The silence in the room was profound. Then my new phone began to ring. It was Arthur. "Margaret," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You've just won the war. The video is being shared everywhere. Their narrative is shattered. The fallout was swift and brutal. The truth, once unleashed, was an unstoppable force." Arthur called the next morning with updates. "Daniel has been let go from his firm. The board saw the video and decided his lack of character was a liability. Chloe's family has publicly disowned them, calling their actions abhorrent. The landlord is formally evicting them for the damage they did to their apartment." I felt a pang of something, not pity but a deep, weary sadness. This was the bed they had made. A few days later, a figure appeared at the gate of my villa. It was Daniel alone. He looked haggard, his expensive clothes replaced by a simple, worn-out jacket. I met him at the gate, not inviting him in. "Mom," he said, his voice raw. The performance was gone. This was genuine desperation. Chloe left. She took what was left of our savings and went to her sister's. She said she couldn't be with a failure. I said nothing. I lost everything. My job, my home, my family. His voice broke. I was wrong. About everything. I was greedy and blind and I treated you horribly. You have to believe me, I'm sorry. You have to grade it even now. It was still a demand. Sorry is a word, Daniel. It's easy to say when you're standing in the ruins of your own life. Can you ever forgive me? He whispered, real tears in his eyes. Forgiveness isn't a switch I can flip, I said, my voice soft but firm. It's a path. And you're only at the very beginning. You need to prove this change is real. Get a job. Any job. Support your children. Become a man your father would be proud of. Do it for yourself, not for me. He nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He had hoped for an immediate pardon, a return to the bank of Mom. He was learning there were no more withdrawals to be made. Can I see you again? He asked. We'll see, I said. Focus on rebuilding your life, Daniel. Truly rebuilding it. I turned and walked back into my home, leaving him at the gate. It was the hardest and most necessary thing I had ever done. With the drama of Daniel's life receding, my own began to expand in ways I'd never imagined. The response to my video had been overwhelming. Dozens of messages poured in from other women, older women, sharing stories of their own, of being manipulated, belittled, and financially exploited by their own children. I showed the messages to Arthur. This is a pandemic, I said, my heart aching. We're taught to sacrifice everything for our families, and that sacrifice is used as a weapon against us. That's why you have a new purpose, Margaret, Arthur said gently. Use your voice. Use Thomas's gift. Inspired, I established the Margaret Pembroke Foundation for Elder Dignity. We used a portion of the inheritance to fund it, providing legal aid, emergency housing, and support networks for older adults facing predatory family members. I hired a sharp, compassionate director named Evelyn, and we set up an office in town. I became a quiet advocate. I didn't seek the spotlight, but I shared my story in controlled settings, community centers, women's groups. I saw the recognition in other women's eyes, the dawning realization that they were not alone, that they were not crazy, and that it was never too late to say no. My life was filled with meaning. I attended book clubs at the Oaks, started a small garden on my villa's patio, and even began traveling with a group of vibrant, like-minded women I'd met. I was living, not just waiting to die. Nearly a year after the confrontation, Daniel reached out again. This time it was a simple text. Mom, I got a job as a manager at a warehouse. It's honest work. The kids are doing well in their new school. I'm in therapy. I think about what I did every day. I hope you're well. It was the first communication that contained no pleas, no demands, no self-pity. It was a simple statement of fact. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it. I saved it as I had saved the others. Arthur confirmed his story. He was telling the truth. He was working, paying his bills, and had shared custody of the children. The true test came on a rainy afternoon. I was at the foundation office reviewing grant applications when Evelyn buzzed me. "Margaret, there's a young woman here to see you. She says her name is Lily. Daniel's daughter." My heart stopped. My granddaughter. I hadn't seen her in over a year. "Send her in." Lily walked in, now a year older, clutching a small damp backpack. She looked so much like Daniel had at that age. "Grandma," she said, her voice small. "Lily, sweetheart. What are you doing here?" I asked, coming around my desk. Her lip trembled. "Dad and I had a fight. I said I hated him and I ran away. I didn't know where else to go." The old automatic instinct to rush to my son's defense rose up, but I quashed it. This was different. This was a child, scared and alone. I knelt down. "Lily, running away is never the answer. Your dad will be worried sick." I picked up my phone. "I'm going to call him, okay? You can stay right here with me until he comes." I called Daniel. His voice was frantic with relief. 20 minutes later, he stood in the doorway of my office, soaked from the rain, his face etched with fear and gratitude. "Mom," he breathed, his eyes going from Lily to me. "Thank you." I didn't know where she was. "She came to the one place she still felt was safe," I said, my gaze holding his. It was a subtle reminder of what he had tried to destroy. He nodded, understanding. He didn't try to come in, didn't try to force a conversation. He just looked at me, and for the first time I saw not a greedy predator, but a tired, flawed man who was genuinely trying. "Let's go home, Lily Bug," he said softly to his daughter. As they turned to leave, he looked back at me. "Thank you, Mom." It was the first thank you that hadn't felt like a transaction. After Lily's visit, a fragile, tentative bridge was built. Daniel would text me occasional, non-intrusive updates, always ending with, "No need to reply. Just wanted you to know." He sent me a drawing Lily had made for me at school, a picture of a big house and a small house with a sun shining over both. I framed it and put it on my desk at the foundation. Arthur and I had lunch regularly. "He's doing the work, Margaret," he told me. "He's not the same man." "I know," I said. "But the trust, that's a different matter. That may never fully return." One afternoon, I was cleaning out a closet in the villa and found the strongbox. I hadn't opened it since that fateful day. I sat on the floor just as I had then and opened it. I reread Thomas's letter, tracing the loops of his handwriting. "Use it not for revenge, but for your freedom. Remind him what family truly means." I realized then that my freedom was complete. I was no longer acting out of fear or anger. I was living my life. And in doing so, I had perhaps begun to remind Daniel what family meant. Not as an entitlement, but as a privilege earned through respect and love. I made a decision. I wouldn't give him money. That would undo all the progress he'd made. But I could offer something else. I invited him and the children to a neutral location, a public park, for lunch. The day was bright and sunny. I arrived first and secured a picnic table. When I saw Daniel walking toward me, holding Lily's and Noah's hands, my breath caught. He looked older, more grounded. The frantic, hungry look was gone from his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said, stopping a few feet away, letting the children run ahead to hug me. "Hello, Daniel." The lunch was stilted at first, but the children's chatter filled the silence. They told me about school, their friends, the dog they wanted. Daniel talked a little about his job, his voice lacking the pretentiousness it once had. When the children ran off to the playground, we were left in a quiet that was no longer entirely uncomfortable. "Mom," he began, staring at his hands, "I don't expect anything from you. Not your money, not your forgiveness. I'm grateful you let me see you today. I'm grateful the kids get to see their grandma." It was the right thing to say. The only thing that could have truly begun to mend the fracture. Your father, I said, left me a letter. He told me to use what he gave me to remind you what family means. I looked at him, my eyes soft. I think you're finally starting to remember on your own. Tears welled in his eyes. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. I know, I said. And for the first time I believed it. Later, as we packed up to leave, Lily ran up and handed me a dandelion puff. For you, Grandma. I took it, my heart swelling with a complex, aching joy. I looked at my grandson chasing a butterfly, at my son watching them with a quiet, responsible love, and at the bright blue sky above. This was the legacy Thomas had truly left me. Not the money, but the courage to reclaim my life. And in reclaiming it, I had perhaps, just perhaps, helped my son find his way back to his. The inheritance they couldn't steal wasn't the fortune in the bank. It was the unshakable peace I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. And that was a treasure no one could ever take from me.